I was curious about the voice of Odo per se, as opposed to it's more of a gravelly, dark voice than your normal delivery. Was that direction from the producers, something you came up with? Did the actual rubber, the prosthetics, actually encourage it?
No, no. What happened was when they were auditioning for the role of all the characters, I was brought in to meet the writers, the producers, the director for the role of Odo. And you know, getting a role in a Star Trek series is pretty sought after because it's a good gig. And I was sitting in the hallway, and there were other actors, not actors for the role that I was going to audition for, because they're good about that usually. They don't get a bunch of actors. You don't have to sit there with colleagues and friends that you know. Actually, Armin was sitting there getting ready to go in to be auditioned for the role of Quark. So I was sitting there, and actually, Michael Piller had always imagined the character more as a young Clint Eastwood, not as someone, because I was 50 already. I was in my 50s. So I was not exactly what they had in mind, but a good casting director, you know, if the casting description is a young Clint Eastwood, a good casting director will bring in, if they're bringing in 20 actors for the role, will not bring in 20 young Clint Eastwoods, because everybody would go, you know, you'd lose your sense of taste. You wouldn't even be able to tell the difference between one and another. So they always throw in some clunker or someone to make them sort of see the character a little differently. So I was sitting there, and then finally it was my turn, and Ron Surma, one of the casting directors, came to get me, and we walked down the hallway to the door that I was going to go through to meet everybody. And just before he opened the door, he turned to me and he said, "Nobody's been grouchy enough." And he opened the door, and I walked in, and they were all sitting behind a long table looking at me. And for years, I had been doing voice work, which we talked about a little while ago. It really came to my aid at that moment. And I guess just instinctively, that voice came out. I had not rehearsed it that way when I was, and I think the first word of the character on the page that I was auditioning was Quark. And that was sort of, it should have told me a lot about what was going to happen. But there's something that happens when you audition in a room. You have a second sense, because a lot of a decision is made the minute you walk in the door. You're either right or you're wrong for a role. And then you can sense, even though you're doing your best and you may be doing fine, that it's just not connecting to those people sitting there. The very first audition I ever had in Hollywood, and this will show you how old I am, was for Gunsmoke, a role in Gunsmoke. I was a very young actor, and I had just come to Hollywood from doing theater up in San Francisco. And I came in, and I sat down in a chair with the script on my knees, and there was a circle of writers and producers and people in front of me, and I put the script down, and before I said a word, I could see out of the corner of my eye somebody there looking across to somebody there going. And anyway, when that first line came out of my mouth for Odo, Quark, I just could tell that there was a sense of them where the moment I walked in, I was not anything that anybody imagined for the role. But the moment that voice came out and that line happened, I could just sense I don't know whether it was literal or I could just feel the audience, my audience, lean forward and pay attention. And I would love to say that the moment I did that, they all stood up and said, "It's yours, you're Odo." But I had to come back 4 more times to convince them. Because apparently, and this is all afterwards I learned these stories, Rick Berman, the lead producer, when I left the room, he turned and said, "Well, that's our Odo." So he was convinced at that moment. But Michael Piller, who had written the character, he wasn't sure. So the next time I came back, it was really to convince him. And apparently, the second time, he was convinced. But there was this one studio executive who just couldn't see it, could not see me in the role. And he kept, and I had to keep coming back and coming back and coming back. And apparently what happened is it came down to, at one meeting very near the end, I had said to my agent, "I can't go back anymore. I have nothing more to show them. They have to make the decision based on that." So they were having apparently this discussion because they were having a lot of trouble casting the role of Dax, they hadn't found Terry Farrell yet, and that was the last character for them to cast. And they were arguing over several different actors, actresses who had come in for the role, and this studio executive was sitting there talking about something, and he said, "You know, it's like that guy you keep saying should play Odo. He's just not, he's just not right. He's just, there's something wrong." And Rick Berman said, "You realize that his whole face will be covered in rubber." And the guy said, oh, that's okay. Then he can." So.
Thank you.
I was curious what your favorite episode of Deep Space Nine was.
Oi. 7 years. How many episodes? Do you know, Mar? Does anybody know how many episodes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine we shot? Well over 100. We did 26 episodes a season. What? 182. Do I hear 183? All right. Well, it was a lot of episodes. So for me, the truth is it just became one big story. And my dear friend, Ethan Phillips, Johnny Phillips, who played Neelix on, I'll tell him. Well, we did Benson together, and he played Pete, and I played Clayton, and he has this joke that he still does to this day. It amuses him incredibly, and we'll be doing something, talking about something, or doing something, and he'll go, "Yeah," and I'll say, "What's so funny?" And he'll say, "Yeah, you remember in episode 98?" And of course, nobody could remember. There were obviously wonderful episodes. Many of them that I was not significantly, that my character was not all that important in. Far Beyond the Stars is the one that occurs to me, where we all got to play different characters and without the makeup. And I really thought that was an extraordinarily interesting and successful episode.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is very weird. There's a television screen here, so I can see myself. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. It's sort of disconcerting. Hi.
I was just wondering, in Deep Space Nine, Odo's character, from the beginning to the end, he develops and learns a lot about himself, and a lot of things contribute to that. And just to name a few, like, he finds this planet Eve, discovers the founders and who they are and what they do. He loses and regains the ability to change, and he falls in love with Kira. Do you think all of those contribute equally to that character growth, or do you think one of these events may have had more influence on him than another?
Gee. No, I mean, it would be hard for me to say one was more important than the other. Well, of course, the fact is that once we did discover, you know, the founders and the whole, that story became clear. Once that was clear, and that was, I don't know in what year that was. I couldn't even tell you. As I said, it's all one big story to me. But once that became clear, if I had any questions, I knew that, you know, one of the joys of doing a television series for 7 years, and why you don't get bored with it, is that you keep, every week when you get a new script, you open the script and there's a new challenge or a surprise for your character, or maybe not. But there's just a lot of, it just keeps changing and morphing and evolving. But once it became clear who the founders were, what that was all about, if I had any questions about where Odo would end up, I knew he had to go back. He had to go home. And I didn't know how it would happen. I didn't know what the terms would be. I didn't know how they would write it, what the story would be. But I knew he was going back. And so I would say that that was probably the most important aspect of the character. You know, discovering where he was from and who he was, that was the thing. Okay?
Hi, you do a lot of voice acting for video games and stuff. What's your favorite character from any video game that you've done?
My favorite character on any video game that I've done? I haven't really done all that many video games. I mean, I do a lot of cartoon voices. Video games, what have I done? I couldn't even tell you. You know what, although I don't really, it was one of the first video games I did, was, I'm going to embarrass myself here. He was a vampire. He was the, what? Soul Reaver, there you go. And yeah, and people respond to that very positively. And then I did, I can't remember the name of it, where I actually did motion capture for that one, and I played some Uncharted, yeah. And thank you. I'm getting so old now I can't remember. You know, if I look at Marguerite Krauss, who is a great friend and runs Oracle, our fan thing, whatever it is. She has researched and archived and figured out everything I've ever done practically. And every once in a while she'll send me a message and say, "It says here that you did Scooby-Doo and such, did you?" And I'll go, I don't know. What was the question? Oh yeah. And then I did something about Fallout Las Vegas, Mr. House, and that was a lot of fun. The thing is actually doing, you call them video games? What do you call them? Video game seems wrong to me because it's not video anymore. But anyway, it's pretty tedious because you have to give all the different options. So you know, you might have, when you're recording it, you might have to say, "Don't go through that door. Go through that door. I wouldn't go through that door if I were you. Maybe you should go through the other door." I don't know. And so that you all can then do whatever you want to do. Mar told me that she killed off my character, Mr. House. And I thought, that's not very fan-based. I don't know. Anyway, there you go.
Hal-Con!